Well, I'm quite nervous. Hi, and welcome to this first episode of Philosophy by Example. It's slightly improvised, but we'll see how it goes and if this works for you. So, the first question I received when I started getting very excited with this project was, can someone understand my emotions if they've never had the same experience? Here I think it's relevant to remember that when we're doing philosophy, having a very well-formulated question is very helpful when we want to understand it. And the first thing that came to my mind with this question was that it had two main possible interpretations. So I had to ask the person who sent me this question to clarify what it was that they meant. Because one of the possible interpretations for this question is, can someone understand my emotions if they've never had the same experience, meaning they haven't had the same experience that I had that caused me to have this particular emotion. And the second interpretation we can give to this question is, can someone understand my emotions if they haven't had the same experience meaning they haven't had this particular emotion. The person who asked this question gave me examples for both possible ways in which we can ask this question. For the case when experience means the thing that triggered my emotional response is bullying. So, can someone understand how it feels to be bullied if they've never experienced or they never have been bullied? Here I would say the answer is quite straightforward, and the thesis I would defend is that no, it's not necessary that someone has the same experience than you do in order to understand an emotion. And why is this? Because the people who experience one same thing, or what we call one same thing, in this case bullying, do not necessarily react in the same way. So even if we have person 1 and person 2, if I knew cool editing stuff, I'd put 2 people here, but this will have to do. Just imagine I have 2 little people in my hands. So if this one is bullied and the emotional reaction that they have is to be angry, and this one is also bullied but the reaction is to be sad, there is nothing wrong with these reactions to the same experience, but rather they're in the basis of our emotions. We need to consider lots of factors, and these include our particular psychological dispositions, our story, and all these things that ultimately determine how we respond when we have these sort of experiences. So considering that even if we have the same experience, this one and this one both are being bullied, they have different emotional reactions. Having the same experience isn't a safeguard, or it isn't a guarantee that these 2 people will understand what the emotions of the other are. That would be my answer to the first question. Some counter-arguments that could be pointed out in this case could be, it can be said that the way I'm answering the question is not really going to the point, because the question is if someone can understand my emotions without having the same experience. But considering that even someone who has the same experience doesn't necessarily understand them, then my answer would be no. But does this mean that the person can't understand the emotions? That would lead us to the second part, or the second interpretation of the same question. So now the question would be, can someone understand my emotions even if they haven't had the same experience? Experience meaning now emotion or emotional state. Here we have a more classical philosophical problem about how we can or cannot know each other's subjective experience of the world or states. So is it possible for me to communicate to others the way I feel, and what limitations does this have? My answer to this question would be that we can understand what others feel even if we have not experienced this. The example that the person gave me for this case was depression. If someone who has not had depression can understand what it is like to be depressed, again, I think there is a problem here in that not everyone who is depressed experiences exactly the same thing, but this does not mean that we cannot intuit what the other person is feeling, because there are many different ways in which depression can be manifested. For instance, some people eat a lot and some stop eating. So if we consider that depression can be manifested in different ways, then we can assume that it's not being felt exactly the same way, right? This is something you can argue, by the way. You can argue against me in this. And if the state, in this case depression, is not experienced in the same way by every person who has depression, then we may wonder if the subjective experience of an emotion is the correct epistemological access or insight for another person's emotion. In this case, I would say not necessarily, because emotions are felt. We can intuit their emotions are felt similarly. So if I'm sad, you can probably imagine what I'm feeling, but maybe you won't feel exactly the same thing that I'm feeling, or you cannot imagine exactly what I'm feeling because of all this history and psychological basis that is within me and cannot be experienced by anyone else than me. But still, I can explain to you the way I feel. If you have the correct disposition, you can understand me. So here, I don't think it is an excuse for someone who has never had a depression to claim that they cannot understand what the person who is depressed is going through, and therefore not adapt the responses they have to them because they can't understand what they are feeling. But in order for someone to understand what this is, there has to be some sort of disposition to learn and understand what this means. One way to access these other people's emotions could be listening to how the person explains how they're feeling. But here, a counter-argument that can be given is that someone may not be able to explain correctly the way they are feeling because they don't really understand what they are going through. And this is quite common, that we are feeling something weird, but we don't know exactly what it is. In these cases, if the first source of knowledge of this emotion can have imperfect knowledge of their own emotions, then how can we say that the other person can actually know what the other person is feeling? And this is a legitimate issue. This is a problem. If the person cannot really explain what they're going through, then it's really hard for another person to know. And another way in which we can understand feelings would be to consult psychology handbooks and see the different ways in which this emotion or emotional state can be manifested. And using this tool, that would be the psychology book or maybe a video or whatever, we get some sort of insight that makes us be approximated to what this person is feeling. The conclusion would be that we cannot get exactly to the emotional states or the internal states of what this person is feeling, but we can get close if we use the correct tools. In these tools being, first, the explanation of the person who is having the emotion, and secondly, having some sort of relevant knowledge or background in psychology, and particularly in how emotions and emotional states work. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this. Please do let me know what you think in the comments or on Twitter on my Curious Cat. because this is really something new and I'm not really sure how to do this. So I really need to know if this is working for you and if you find this interesting. I think the next video will be about numbers, whether they are properties or objects, because I have been haunted by this question for a while. I know that the purpose of this channel is to answer your questions. Really the issue about numbers is just following me everywhere and I need to talk about this. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. Share if you enjoyed this, and bye for now.